Good evening, this is not Joseph Campbell. In my lifetime of studies in myth and folklore, I am forever struck by the perpetual reoccurrence of the narrative cycle of death and rebirth, of decay and renewal, which serves as no less than an expression of the universal will, as reified in the human imagination by the stages of the quest myth. And there's no finer representation of this monomythic cycle than a charming tale by the 20th century Americans entitled The Office Space. Our tale begins, as so many before, with the motif of the wasteland. A kingdom has grown old and corrupt. That which once served now brings suffering, as all buckle under a system rendered sterile and obsolete.
Why does it say pepper jam when there is no pepper jam? I swear to God. Piece of shit.
Ruling this land is the tyrant king Holdfast. Hold fast, the tyrant cries. All shall remain as is. This king is the hoarder for his own benefit, the figure of greed and avarice, his power used only to maintain the status quo. But change is inevitable. No man can resist the cosmic cycle. Death must come to the land of Holdfast, for only death can bring new life. The land thus cries out for a savior, a slayer of monsters and seeker of truths, who also must die, only to be reborn. As is common, our hero is of humble origin, simple in mind and ambition, though possibly of virgin birth. This is Peter Gibbons, Saint Peter, holder of the keys to heaven. Gibbon, a small ape. The name a symbolic duality of man's quest for salvation, beleaguered by his primitive state. Peter bends under the oppression of the tyrant king. Falsehood surrounds him.
I don't know. Sometimes I get the feeling like she's cheating on me.
Yeah, I get that feeling too, man.
But destiny has chosen him to be the world's savior, the renewer of life, the bringer of the ultimate boon. Early one morning, whilst crossing a grassy glen with his pair of loyal cohorts, the Samir and troubadour Michael Bolton, Peter is met by a fat dwarf bearing tidings of ill. This is the archetype of the herald, just as the grim reaper, just as Virgil's appearance to the poet Dante. The herald cries, "Stop! Change must come! Leave this road and follow me!" This is the call to adventure, the psychic summons to abandon the past in quest for renewal. But our young man is incredulous of the dwarf and ignores his pleas. Here we have the refusal of the call. Peter dare not risk challenge King Holdfast. Like Sigmund Freud's cases of childhood neuroses, Peter wishes to cling to his existing world out of fear of losing its illusions of value. But adventure cannot commence until such attachments are relinquished, and this is brought about by the supernatural aid of a monstrous old wizard. As an amulet of protection, the wizard casts a spell to render Peter invincible to his enemies. His life's mission fulfilled, the wizard turns to dust the moment the spell is cast. But with that death comes new life, for with the mage's final words, the old Peter dies, only to re-emerge from his placenta of entrancement, with infant wonder in his eyes. This is a purified Peter, a Peter untainted by corruption, unbound to former loyalties. We have crossed a mystic barrier, for rebirth can only come from rebirth. Empowered by his transformation, our hero strides fearlessly into the unknown, to the crossing of the first threshold. Yet, just as societies of old projected their fears into imagined monsters lurking beyond the borders of the village, so it is in myth. The entrance to the zone of magnified power is overwatched by threshold guardians, twin ogres, both by the name of Bob. Like the Sphinx of Thebes, the Bobs assail their victims with riddles and devour all those who cannot respond correctly.
What would you say you do here?
While Peter's cohorts urge him to turn back, our hero is undaunted. In his purified state, Peter outwits the twin ogres, not through guile or show of force, but by the effortless nature of his newborn purity. In a scene reminiscent of the young Buddha's battle with the demon's sticky hair, Peter baffles the Bob through his innocence, his honesty, and his absolute lack of fear, convincing these guardians to not only yield the way, but pledge themselves in his service. The Damn It Feels Good to Be a Gangster sequence presents, in quick succession, the road of trials every hero must face on his journey. Peter's office odyssey is a deadly desert, fraught with obstacles. But with the invincibility of his amulet, Peter passes these trials with ease. He has crossed the rocks that clash, and the reeds that cut, and the sand that burns, and the wannabe-gonna-be pranksters. And when confronted by King Holdfast, Peter brushes them aside with the wave of his hand. He has proved mighty. The kingdom is his for the taking. But no quest is complete without the marriage to the Goddess Mother. The Goddess Mother is a symbolic form of an intangible ideal. She represents the apex of comfort and happiness a mortal man may hope to achieve in the material world, made flesh here by the resplendent Joanna. Early in our tale, the hero captures a glimpse of this radiant queen, much like the ancient Greek hunter chancing upon sight of the goddess Diana. Yet while the mortal Peter must avert his gaze, the divinely empowered Peter approaches this goddess's altar to win her favor with his boldness. For the divine may recognize the divine, and only her eyes can perceive the numinous light which now surrounds him.
You ever watch Kung Fu?
I love Kung Fu.
But like many a princess before her, Joanna has forgotten her royal lineage and is now trapped in servitude to a cruel master with his chains of flair.
We need to talk about your flair.
She too must be freed from her green-barred prison for renewal to come to the land. For the goddess is life, and by their holy union, the hero gains supreme knowledge of life. Now nestled in the bosom of the Goddess Mother, Peter believes he has achieved true bliss. However, as many a hero, Peter soon finds such material pleasures hollow and fleeting. Paradise turns to rot, as our hero discovers filth and corruption in all earthly things. He has entered the woman as temptress stage of the monomyth.
So you're gonna fire Michael and Samir and you're gonna give me more money? Wow.
Like the young Buddha departing the palace walls, like Adam in Eden, Peter bites the fruit of the tree of knowledge, and what once was honey turns to ash. The scales fall from his eyes, and our Peter becomes aware of the stench of wickedness and decay which surrounds him. Even the goddess figure fades from beauty as a trickster impugns her with the stain of Holdfast's seed.
Lumberg fucked her. I see who else. Rennie. Lumberg?
There is only one recourse. Revolution must come to the land of Holdfast. All idols of corruption must be struck down and destroyed. But rebellion alone is insufficient. The land demands a higher salvation. Thus we enter the stage known as atonement with the Father. The Father is the universal all-power, the source of all wisdom, the invisible dispenser of punishment and reward. He holds the boon of salvation. But our hero is not yet worthy. He succumbs to foolish vanity. Peter attempts to match corruption with corruption, greed with greed, by stealing the base earthly treasures from Holdfast's vaults. But the All-Father laughs at Peter's folly, and with a flip of his hand reverses Peter's fortunes, throwing our hero into his Supreme Ordeal. Like the heroes Aeneas and Gilgamesh before him, Peter must descend into the darkest valley of death to face terrors and anxieties most profound, momentarily allayed by a comic aside with a mischievous shapeshifter peddling false wares. It is only through such an ordeal that Peter's soul is purified to a state of utmost humility, finally rendering him receptive to the Father's almighty truth. As the price of his atonement, our hero throws himself on the sacrificial fire, surrendering his ill-gotten treasure and offering his life in exchange for that of Samir and Michael Bolton. And with this act, Peter attains apotheosis. Apotheosis is only attained through absolute self-denial. All pride must be abandoned and all self annihilated. Thus, with this act of pure self-sacrifice, Peter is atoned with the Father and allowed to rejoin the side of the Goddess Mother. Peter is then saved from destruction by the divine intercession of the Father. Castle Holdfast burns, death clearing the path for renewal of this world. It is most intriguing that this final destruction comes not by the hero, but through the aid of a lowly troll. But behind his ghastly appearance, the troll is a secret agent of the Father, an observer of sins and dispenser of just desserts.
Excuse me. Excuse me. But, okay, but that's the last straw.
Indeed, the herald dwarf and the troll of fire are as twin servants of the Father, two creatures hatched from the same egg, one light and one dark. One the caller for rebirth, the other the agent of destruction. And as a reward for their service, both dwarf and troll, by strokes of what the unenlightened call fate, are rescued from their land of earthly toil, to ascend to a plane of blissful ease. Finally begins the return portion of the hero's journey. At the crossing of the return threshold, Peter faces the question every hero must consider upon re-entering the everyday world. Will such common mortals be able to understand the wisdom gained on the other side? Are they willing to drink the magical elixir the hero has to share? Sadly, the answer is no. His cohorts remain short-sighted. Nevertheless, we leave Peter standing triumphantly in the ashes of Castle Holdfast, cleansing its final traces in a land of renewed freedom and beauty. Peter has become the master of two worlds and has achieved the freedom to live. So, through the continual cycle of death and renewal, our story ends happily ever after. On a final note, we find that the theme of death and renewal so permeates the mythic consciousness that it arises in the most unexpected places. Indeed, this world-redeeming truth is pronounced clearly in the text through the most trivial line of speech. As an intoxicated Samir leaves Peter's home, in his ecstasy, he is heard to say, as if incanting a spell of his own,
Back up in your ass with the resurrection.
"Back up in your ass indeed, Samir. Most indeed." For Script Monk, this has not been Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell doesn't even sound anything like this.